Let's create this retro synthwave text in a way that you can edit at any time. If you've just joined us, we've already made this background scene in the previous video, but feel free to download it along with the fonts and textures from the description below. So to add the text, make sure that the fonts Thunderstorm and Yukari have been downloaded already. For the fonts that we're going to be using, any cursive font with this sort of wild style will work really well, and any ultra bold font like this will work really well as well. So get those installed if you haven't already, and go over to your text tool over here. In your text tool, let's set it up to work properly first before you click anywhere. Let's go to the top and change the font. I'm going to first of all use my font Yukari like that. Yukari Mobile is fine, and I'm going to have the size of it quite big at about 300. I've got the mode over here set to sharp, which you can change later if you need. Next, change the color to be white. We're working in a dark image, and this is how you change your color at the top up here. So click near the left hand middle of your image like this. Do not drag a text box. Text boxes are annoying, and you may not see any text appear at all as it's too big for whatever text box you may have drawn. So just click once like that. It comes up with lorem ipsum. Lorem ipsum will already be highlighted, meaning that you can immediately change it to whatever you want. So I'm just going to type in the name of my channel here. If you're using two words, obviously just type in the first word for this one, and the second word will look really cool if it was in the cursive style. So to change your text after you've done it, quite a lot of my students have issues with the text tool. You need to make sure that any changes you want to make, you have to select the text first, just like you're in Microsoft Word in primary school. They always say select your text, and then you can go and change things like the color and the size like this. If you drag the symbol for the font size, your font will get bigger. Quite a lot of my students try and hit the drop down arrow here, and it only goes up to size 72, which is obviously way too small for anything interesting. I'm going to keep in mind about that size there, and then you can go to the move tool to move it. That's this tool up here. Now don't hit V on the keyboard this time because it will literally type in the letter V. You'll have to move your mouse over here to go to the move tool, and then you can kind of move your image to the middle. If you have a tail on one of your letters, it looks quite cool if the tail's going through the middle of the glowing line there. And now I'm going to add a gradient to this text. There is a gradient to sample from in the things that you downloaded, like this, if that helps, but we're going to kind of put that on our text, or you can make up your own. I am going to sample mine. So if you want to sample from an image, you can just drag it into Photoshop to cheat like this, and then you can sample from it in a second. So click on your text layer now with the move tool up here, and then double click on the empty gray part of your layer to bring up your layer style. Swing down to gradient overlay here. It may remember the gradient that you used on the floor, and as you can see, it looks quite cool. I'm going to just do reset to default here, and then click on the empty gradient here so that it's right from basics. So let's start off with double clicking on the left side over here, and I'm going to change the color to almost pure white, but not quite 100% pure white. F5, F5, F5 is what I'm using there. I've hit OK. Double click on the white square on the right hand side this time, and let's change the color to almost black like this. OA, hit OK. And now we can add some crazy colors in between. So I'm going to click here, which is the next color along, and I'm going to add this pink color here. So you can just go straight up and sample a color for it like that, or double click on it to choose your own. Next color along seems to be about here. Click there, and again you can double click to choose your own color, or if you just have that one selected, move your mouse over to whatever you want to sample from. It may be colors in your image already. You can sample from that as well, and you can keep going in there. Now, to make it look really cool, when you get to the middle, add one more here and make the color pretty much almost black, or at least very dark purple like that. And then click somewhere to the right of it like this, and this time make it almost pure white like that. And then drag the white color closer to the left to the black one. This creates quite a sharp gradient in between them like this. You can see here now there's a slight fade, which is good. Anything sharper than that will look a bit too fake, but you've now got a very tight gradient in there, which is good. Then you can go to the next color up, which I've got here for the blue, and you're pretty much done. You can use these little diamonds in between to affect the other attributes of your gradient, and you can obviously double click on the colors to maybe make them a little brighter if you want. But now you've got that set up hit OK in your gradient editor, and as you can see, it looks pretty cool. Now we're going to want to add a glow to this, so let's go straight down to where it says outer glow. Click on the word for outer glow, and it's a bit too intense, so I'm going to first of all change the color of the outer glow here to a slightly more deeper shade of blue like this. You can't sample a color from your gradient, as you can see, because it thinks it's selecting the white text, so don't do that. But feel free to sample from a part of your image, like maybe there's a bright part of space here that you want it to do. I'm personally going to choose a slightly deeper shade of blue that's a bit darker like that. I'm choosing the color 552E96, hit OK on that. It should be remembering the other settings that you set up earlier on for this lightsaber layer. So the opacity 100%, noise to 5, spread to 2, and size to 32. Feel free to modify these as your heart desires. Now, we're going to need to create a beveled effect to go around the side of our letters here. If you go to bevel and emboss, in my opinion, this looks a little bit tacky if I increase the size and the depth here. It does create a bevel, but the colors on the side of it don't look quite right. It doesn't look super shiny. So I'm not going to use bevel and emboss. I don't like it. Instead, I'm going to click on the word stroke. When you click on the word stroke, if I reset this, a black outline will appear, which is great. If you just want to do this quickly, you can change the color to pure white, and it doesn't look too bad at all. This sort of white sheen is the sort of thing you'll see on the edge of a beveled object as it catches the light. But what you can do, instead of choosing to fill your stroke with a color, you can instead choose gradient, and then you can do some really cool stuff. If you're in a hurry for the stroke, what you can do is go down to your gradient overlay that you set up previously, click on the shiny layer bar here, and you can type in a name for the gradient that you just made. So I'll type in CGI 80s, and then hit the new button, and it will come up at the bottom of your presets up here, and remember it for another time. You can then hit OK and go through to your stroke, and in there, click on the gradient fill bar, and if you scroll down in the list here, you can indeed see the gradient you set up before. So if you can click on that, hit OK, and you'll see that it obviously matches it exactly, so you can't see anything. But if you tick the box to the right for reverse, then obviously what colors were at the top, like this black shade here, is now down here, and the white color of the bottom is now at the top. This can create a nice shiny effect to it as the colors are inverted. If you don't like the colors it's given you, you might want to go into the gradients and just modify it a bit. I feel that the black color at the bottom is too intense, so I'm going to double click on that and maybe just sample a color from somewhere in my image, like this purple here, and just play around with that. So I'm going to make the black color on the right now go to a lighter shade of lavender purple like that, and at the top where it was once pure white, if I double click on that and maybe do something similar with this sort of pink like this, and then you can go ahead and hit OK on that. If you're not keen on any colors like the middle sharp horizon line, then you can drag things away like that to create the effect that you want. And something like this I feel works quite well. When you're happy, you can hit OK. You can then go in and adjust the size of the stroke. I've got my stroke going up here to about 3 pixels, but you can go crazy with that if you want. I've also set the mode of the stroke to be center here as well. You can see from the preview how cool your shape looks, and then you are done. That's how you can create text that looks really shiny in a really cool 1980s way like that. What's even better about this is you can go into the text tool and double click on the text and change it to something else, and it will update in real time, which is just really awesome. Let's add our second word. Go back to your text tool. Remember, with your text tool, if text tool has a dotted line on it like this, it will create a new text box. If it doesn't, then it will modify existing text. So with the text tool, make sure you click far enough away from your previous text so that it comes up with something new. Now, lorem ipsum has appeared here, and immediately I'm going to drag the two T's so it's a lot smaller. I'm going to drag this down to about 140-ish, and at the top, I'll change the font to Thunderstorm, like this, and then you can type in your second word, like that. For this, we can just give it a pink color. If you double click on the blank space by your layer here and go to where it says color overlay, click on that, choose a shade that you feel works. I'm going to go for a crazy shade of pink or something like that, hit OK. I just sampled there from my CGI text. I'm using the color DD5DBF. If you want to add any other sheen effects to this, you can go to where it says bevel and emboss, click on the word for bevel and emboss, and what you're going to want to do is increase the opacity of the highlight mode to about 50%, and then if you increase the depth to 1000% and increase the size beyond the point where it looks like it's been cut out of stone, you'll eventually end up with something like that. You can of course increase the soften on it, and it might just give it a cool effect. So you can play around with that. For the darker part, it looks a bit dull because the shadow mode is set to black. If you click on the black color here, you can maybe sample it to be a bit more purple or something like that, so your shadows are pretty crazy. This step is optional, but you can adjust the opacity of either of these settings to lower the amount that you see them in your image. Just there, hit OK. To rotate this layer, move your mouse just beyond the edge of the boundary. Make sure the auto select and show transform controls is on, and then you can just see your mouse turns into a rotation tool, so you can rotate your shape like this. If any of you guys from the internet are thinking I'm stating the obvious with some of the things I'm saying here, like how to rotate objects, believe me, quite a lot of these are the things that quite a lot of my students have the most trouble with in lesson, so I always include things like that in the video. If your text looks difficult to read over the pink, then you might want to change the color of that, so you can go into your word and go back to where it says color overlay and just choose a darker shade. I've now changed it to CC1 and now it's slightly easier to read, although maybe look a little bit too intense, but it's the 80s, it'll be fine. I am going to just add a little glow on this as well by double clicking again, and let's throw on an outer glow. Change the Although purple looks pretty cool, you can just click on the color for your glow and just sample a color from your text. Hit OK, and then lower the opacity of that glow down quite a lot just to give it that sort of look. Hit OK. The next steps are to add sparkles and aged effect to this. To do that, I'm going to remove this layer from up here by clicking on it, hitting delete, and I'm going to go to my downloaded images and find the sparkles, which is called sparkle. Drag that in like this, and you're probably thinking that looks really tacky. What are you doing? But it's intentional. It's the 80s. It's supposed to look really tacky. Don't worry about it. So scale that down, and I'm going to pop this just above the eye there to give it that nice sheen. And when you've got that, you can hit the enter button on the keyboard or the tick at the top. And by default, the glow is very monochrome. In the 80s, all the sparkles have a really cool sort of color to them. So if you want to double click on the empty area here by sparkle, go down to where it says outer glow, and you can change it to whatever color you want. Personally, I think changing it to a blue like this, I'm using the color 2648F7, a quite intense blue, but from a distance, it just looks great. You can then duplicate the sparkle by doing Control J and move it out somewhere else. Keep your secondary sparkles a lot smaller, about less than half the size would be ideal, and maybe just pop them in a couple of places elsewhere. It has duplicated the glow effect on it, and if you can't see it as much, you might want to double click on the layer and just go to your outer glow and change the size down like this, and maybe the opacity up if you want. I've kept the noise on there as well. So somewhere near a corner usually works really well, and it's Control J to duplicate again. And it's probably best just to have as few as possible like this, but if you want to go bonkers, you can hold Alt on the keyboard, and while holding Alt you can drag a shape and it will then just duplicate that again as well like this, which can be quite cool. But too many sparkles on it looks a bit too bonkers, but I'm just going to do that for a laugh. I like it. Next, to do a sunset behind it in the distance, get your new layer and double click here, and we're going to call this one sun, and just get a elliptical marquee tool and drag out a circle. Before you let go of your mouse, hold shift and it will create a perfect circle. It's best to create one that's slightly bigger than you need, and you can scale it down later on. Make sure the top isn't touching the top of your page, creating a tangent there. And I'm going for something like this. Now we're going to fill it with a gradient. Now these colors did take me a long time to choose, so I'm going to cheat with my little color palette there. So if you go onto the sun layer, fill it with a pure white color like this, and then you can deselect with Control D, and then double click in the empty white area by your sun layer. And let's go straight to gradient overlay. Click on the word gradient overlay. It remembers the one from before, and I'm going to go to the gradient here. I'm just actually going to reset to default for this, and even when you hit reset to default, it does remember your previous gradients. Don't worry about that. But I double clicked on the gradient bar there. I'm going to go down to the left hand color like this, and I'm going to choose the color for the bottom of the sun, which is going to be like kind of a deep pink here. So I've chosen for the bottom of the sun, it's going to be the color E450D8. Hit OK. For the middle of the sun, choose an orange color from there and click on that and hit OK. And for the top on the right hand side, choose the yellow color like this. So the colors I've used here are, for the middle one, E97668, and for the one on the right, I've used E7AB40. Hit OK, and that gives you really cool sort of 80s sunset colors on there. hit OK. Let's add an outer glow to this as well. Click on the word for outer glow and just choose the average middle color from this. So for the color for outer glow here, you're going to want to choose the color from the middle of the sun. Now, annoyingly, you can't just click in the middle because it thinks it's pure white. But if you just use the color that I've got here, I'm using this sort of peachy color E97669 there. That just creates quite a warm glow. That's an average shade of the whole sun. Hit OK. For this glow, we're going to need the size to be much bigger, the spread to be almost pretty much completely off to 0. So the size is about 100-ish, and we're going to put the opacity of this right the way down to something like 50% or something like that. And I'm keeping the noise there at 5. Hit OK on that. Now, what's great about these layer styles is that not only can you modify text with them on, you can also change the shapes of layers and they still apply to it. So if I was to delete part of the sun here, you can see the glow has also affected that. So you could indeed create like a cool portal effect by removing a bit from the middle here or something. But what we're going to do is kind of just cut the sun out with some lines here. So go to your rectangular marquee tool and drag a selection box over the bottom part like this. And so this box that I'm doing here is going to be about 25 pixels high. You can see from the little option thing on the right. Hit delete. I'm then going to move my mouse up and just drag a strip that's slightly smaller than that. So this time it's only going to be about maybe 20 pixels in height. Hit delete and go up a little bit more. This time choose one that's much less than that, maybe only about 12 pixels. Hit delete. You can move the shape around just by clicking in the middle of it. And for the top one, it was about 5 pixels on that one. And you can use the arrows on the keyboard to move it around. And if you're happy with it, you can hit delete. Go crazy and do what you think looks good for that. But once you're done, go back to your move tool and you can move the sun layer down underneath your text and also underneath the mountains as well. So it's quite far near the bottom of your image like that. If you want to modify the colors and just play around with them, the easiest way to do it is going to be to rasterize this by doing right click, rasterize layer style, and do Control M on the keyboard or image adjustments curves, and you can adjust the colors of your sun to be a bit more orange and rich just by clicking from the middle and dragging down to the right like that. But I'm quite happy with how it was there. The final step in this entire tutorial is to simply add a bit of grain and some finishing touches to it. So to do that, in your downloads, you're going to see there's a image called 001 and dirty texture. Let's drag in 001 first over to the top of your image here. And as you can see, it's not quite the right size, but don't stretch it. Instead, just drag the corners out while holding Alt to resize them all at the same time. Hit enter. This layer is going to need to go above them all. So just drag that all the way to the top. Then where it says normal here, change the blending mode from normal to something like screen. Now, when you set it to screen, it will look a little bit pale. So you could change it to color dodge to solve the problem quickly. Or if you want to stay in the screen blending mode, just do curves for this with Control M to bring up your curves window. And just drag the middle bar down like this so that it kind of pushes the midtones away and the midtones are darker, but most of the highlights and the shadows remain the same. So that should look better. So I'm doing it to about that much there. Whatever you think looks good, hit OK on that. It just adds a few scratches and stuff over your image and a few creases. If you want to customize those, you can of course use the spot healing brush or the clone stamp tool and hold Alt to sample from part of the image and try painting somewhere else. You will of course need to rasterize the layer before doing so, but you can kind of just copy and paste any scratches over other parts of your image if you want. But I'm quite happy with that. There's finally some more dust to put over the top, which is your dirty texture from here, and drag that over the top like this, scale it up, and change it to something like color dodge like that. So it's only really noticeable in the key areas. Final step, let's add some vignette around the edges of our image. To do that, create a brand new layer. So I've made a new layer. I'm going to name this one vignette. And the quickest way of doing it, get the paint bucket tool from in there, make the color pure black, fill it in, get E for eraser, and set your eraser size to bigger than the height of your image. So I'm setting my eraser size to 1900 here, and the opacity is going to be 100%. And I'm just going to click once in what I think is the middle of the scene there. That's the fastest way I can really get a vignette in Photoshop. And if you click again, it does just increase the amount of the image that's brighter and easier to see there. That is it for creating your image. The final tips I'll give you are that if you want to click through this image, or if you are uploading it to something like Graphic River to sell for a few quid, then you're going to want to make this work for your clients or customers. To do this, your clients might open this image up and realize they can't actually click on the text to change it. Just to make sure that they can do that on your top layers, like your vignette and stuff. If you lock the layers with the padlock like this, then that means that you can click through those layers onto the text itself. So although they're still visible, you do not need to turn your layers off in order to click what's underneath. So it's really good. And I'm just quickly changing my font so it's a bit easier to read and the pinks aren't as vibrant. But that's it. I hope that helped, and good luck with whatever project you're using this for. See you next time.